Hello, this is Hillary Moore. I am the senior editor at Dressage Today magazine, and I want to welcome everyone to our Ask the Author webinar with Janet Foy. She is the author of our November Book Club of the Month, Dressage for the Not So Perfect Horse. Janet is not only an FEI four-star judge and USEFS dressage judge, but she's also a monthly columnist with Dressage Today, and we hope that you will not only enjoy the evening's webinar, but also check out her column every month in the magazine. Thank you, Janet, for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Hillary. This is exciting. I've never done one of these, but I'm looking forward to talking to all of the guests. So, shall we go ahead and
So we're
start
going to go
with?
ahead and Yes, we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. So take it away, Janet.
All right, so can we go to the first slide? What we're going to do in this webinar is talk about the warm-up and how you would warm your horse up either for the show ring or every day when you get on to school your horse. And I think the warm-up is so important and a lot of times is not taught very well or understood very well. So I think how you warm the horse up depends a lot on what kind of horse you have. And in my book, I identify 6 different types of horse. I have a horse that's very hot, very energetic. That would be thinking of a thoroughbred, an Arabian, or a warm blood that has a lot of thoroughbred or Arabian in them. And then the second type of horse is the horse that's lazy, and this horse would just rather lay out in the pasture and eat grass. And a lot of warm bloods are very lazy. There are a lot of quarter horses that are rather lazy. And sometimes, depending on whether they got more thoroughbred or more draft cross, sometimes the draft crosses are a bit lazy as well. The third type is a horse that is very high-necked. And this really pertains to the more modern types of horses that are being bred for dressage in the warm blood industry, and also Arabians. Arabians normally have quite a nice high arched neck, and this can cause some difficulties in the warm-up. The fourth type of horse is a horse that's rather low necked. The neck comes more straight out of the withers, thoroughbreds, quarter horses. Sometimes the draft horses can also have a bit of a low neck. And this type of horse needs to be warmed up in a different way than the high-necked horse. The fifth type of horse is what we would call the draft type. And I've worked with a lot of these with my eventing students, and they're very, very interesting. They can be a little bit of a split personality. Sometimes they pretend they're a thoroughbred, and sometimes they pretend they're a draft horse. So how we warm them up is also important to talk about. And then the last type of horse is the horse who is spooky. And often this horse is also hot. It's hot and spooky. But oftentimes this spooky horse is a horse that's actually learned to spook to avoid the work. So the spooky horse can also be a very smart horse that has learned spooking totally derails the plan of the rider. And so we need to talk about that type as well. So let's move to the next slide. So problem number 1, let's discuss the hot horse a little bit. And I hope all of you out there are thinking of questions that you can ask that pertain to the type of horse you have. Now, the hot horse is a little bit the kind of horse that can run away at the walk. If you think of the horse on a long rein as walking as fast as they can go, it's a horse that doesn't really wait for your leg. It doesn't wait for the rider to have ideas. This horse has its own ideas. And in this type of warm-up, we need to do a lot of transitions. We need to do a lot of curved lines. This type of horse doesn't need very many straight lines in the warm-up. If you just think about it, straight lines are for impulsion and curved lines are for submission. So the hot horse, normally we're discussing submission always. He needs to be connected over the back, supple in the contact, and allow the rider to have access to the hind legs and not just stiffen and brace in the bridle and run through that contact. So curved lines, lots of bending, spiral in, spiral out. Shoulder in is a wonderful exercise in the transitions, shoulder in from trot to walk. All of these things to have the horse a little bit start to listen to your aids and not take over. Let's go to slide number 2. And we have here just a list of some things I was talking about. The roundest frame as possible. And this is a little bit experimentation, and riding is a little bit experimenting. Kira Kirkland, one of my favorite people in the world, always says, if it's not working, go slower. If it's not working, go faster. If it's not working, make the horse straighter. If it's not working, bend the horse more. If it's not working, bring the neck up. If it's not working, bring the neck down. So in other words, you have to be willing to experiment a little bit and adjust the horse and change things a little bit to see where you can get the most control over the horse's muscles, over the top line, which is what we call longitudinal suppleness, and then over the lateral suppleness as well. And you see also transitions are a very, very good way to help the horse be a little bit more on the aids, waiting for you. Lateral bending, spiral in, spiral out. I use a lot of voice aids for transitions. I talk to my horse. I know you're not allowed to do this in the show ring, but I must say I did a lot of those little sounds with my young horses to keep them a little bit calm and quiet. Even in the show ring, most judges are a little bit deaf unless you're very, very obvious. Mental relaxation is important, and sometimes with the hot horse, you need to lunge him a little bit first with side reins, put him back in his stall at a show, and then bring him out again for a second work, or take a trail ride in the morning and then bring the warm-up out. Hot horses often benefit from a nice relaxing trail ride. So don't forget that you do have that option. And then physical suppleness, again, talking about making sure the muscles, both laterally and longitudinally, aren't stiff and that can carry the energy in a nice way into your contact. So let's go to the next slide. Now we have the lazy horse, and this horse in the picture is having a nap in the stall, probably waiting for his next meal. And this type of horse needs lots of straight lines, but believe it or not, also lots of transitions. You will bore a lazy horse to death if all you do is race around the arena. You also need to think about the suppleness of the muscles, because those are the muscles that carry the energy from the hind legs to the bit, over his back. Think of those muscles over the back and through the neck, a little bit like your freeway, that you can't raise the speed limit on your freeway if you have a bunch of traffic accidents. So you need to think of getting those muscles free and open to carry the energy forward. But lots of little transitions, forward, back, forward, back. You almost thinking about making him a little bit nervous. This type of horse is easily bored. Even in your daily work, maybe some trot poles in your arena. That also just keeps them a little bit interested. So let's go to some solutions. A working frame. Again, this horse, the lazy horse, doesn't need to be too low and deep, because they sometimes pull down a little bit and get a little bit too much on the forehand. So this one I wouldn't ride too long and low, where the hot horse benefits a little bit from being a little bit deeper and having a little bit more stretch. So quick transitions, trot, canter, walk, trot, canter, walk, forward, back, forward, back. And remember, I said a lot of straight lines. Straight lines are very, very beneficial for the lazy horse. something I really like to do out of every corner with a lazy horse, whether you're going straight down the long side or on the diagonal. Go like hell for a little bit. Just make them really go and then do the movement. You'll benefit so much better if you can have the horse thinking a little more forward on his own out of the corner rather than maybe starting the shoulder in right away out of the corner. Think a little medium trot for 10 meters and then do a little bit of shoulder in. And then before he slows down, straighten him and do another little bit of medium trot. Remember, you want a quick response from a light aid. And I think you have to remember that the spur is a reminder and the whip is there to reinforce the leg. So if your horse is lazy, the answer is not to put a bigger and bigger spur on because they just get dull to the spur. And the rider has to be very careful that they're not banging all the time with the lower legs either, because that makes the horse very dull as well. Suppling to prevent stiffness, adding a few curved lines, short little pieces of shoulder in. Make sure the horse will supple and bend, and then ride the horse forward through that bend. So straight lines and stringing fewer and fewer movements together. The lazy horse should never do 3 collecting movements in a row unless you're at a horse show. That's a sure way to fail. All right, let's go to the next horse. Now this horse is the high-necked horse, Arabians, the warm bloods. What happens with the horse that lifts and arches his neck and pulls it backwards towards you a little bit is that at the same time that happens, it pushes the thoracic sling muscles or their belly muscles down and also takes the loin muscles and pulls everything down. And as soon as those muscles are pushing or pulling downwards, you can't use those muscles to bring the hind legs more forward under the body. So I remember Robert Dover said to me 30 years ago, wherever your horse wants to be by nature, change it. So here we have the perfect example. The high-necked horse, we need to make the horse's neck lower because he will come up in the show ring just because of the atmosphere. Let's go to the next slide. So we have success with a high-necked horse from a deeper, rounder warm-up. So we think of that stretchy, chewy circle. This is a fabulous exercise to go back to 3 or 4 or 5 times during your warm-up, always making sure the horse will stretch, always making sure the horse will lengthen and stretch those muscles and relax a little bit. Also, the stretchy, chewy circle is a great exercise for the hot horse. Very, very important. So you want this high-necked horse to really be stretching over his back with his neck down and lifting up through the withers and a little bit really lifting those tummy muscles so he can bring the hind legs under. So submission to the lateral longitudinal stretching, very, very important with this high-necked horse. And you may need to explain it to this horse a little bit slowly without the impulsion. Again, submission is the most important thing, that you get the horse in the correct place where he can really use his muscles to his best advantage. Then use your impulsion and ride the horse forward through this new frame. Next slide. Now we have the total opposite. We have the horse with the low neck. And again, now we have to talk a little bit about the conformation in relationship to how far the horse can move up the levels. And this is where you really just never know. You can say often, oh, that's a fabulous horse, it's going to be Grand Prix, and then it ends up at 4th level and never moves on. I've also been surprised. There's a horse in my book, Hibernian Breeze, who was very, very low-necked and croup high, a thoroughbred mare, and she was a wonderful St. George I horse, went on to Young Riders with Sandy Holtz, who is now an S judge and an FEI 3-star judge. So you really never know. Conformation does play a huge part, but also you have to think about their personality and oftentimes their brain and their willingness to work can overcome a little bit the conformation. And so this horse, you have to be careful that you don't ride him too deep, because if he is too deep, it's not going to be very successful. You're going to lose a lot of suspension, and the hind legs are going to push out behind, which you can see in this picture. So think about making the top line round. You still want the neck round, but you don't have to have the neck too low, and make sure the neck isn't too straight. You see this horse in the picture has a very flat, straight body angle, and that is going to be a difficult horse in dressage to create a medium, or things that need more impulsion, which means it needs more suspension. Next slide. So again, we go back to our experimenting to find the right neck position. And don't be afraid to do this. Don't be afraid to change things. One thing we have to think about when we're riding, and I love this, when Stefan and I do our symposiums, he says, you must test the horse or the horse will test you. So again, always as you're warming up, always as you're schooling and training through the day, you have to be willing to change things a little bit. You have to stretch him down, you have to bring him back, you have to make him a little straighter, you have to bend him a little more, you have to go a little forward, you have to collect and make some transitions. So be very careful you're not boring your horses to death when you ride them, when you warm them up. Try to be creative, change directions often, make sure you give them nice walk breaks 3 or 4 times, or at least a stretch as you work so their muscles don't get tired. Make sure that with this low-necked horse, you avoid putting him on the forehand. Be very careful with the balance, and think about where you need to get the back loose. And I think that's really the key with this horse. You have to have a neck position where you can also get the loins loose. So keep thinking about the loins, and again, his balance, that he's not coming down on his shoulders. Next slide. Now, this problem is my horse is a draft type, and the draft type is bred to pull with the shoulders. Very, very careful when you work this horse. I do not teach this breed the stretchy circle for at least a year once they're started under saddle. I want them to be really very clear that they cannot pull down on their shoulders. I also am a little careful that we don't go too forward until they're stronger, until they've developed a little bit of carrying power from the hind legs. Most of the time, the trot is a little bit easier to work with, and the canter is a little bit more difficult. They get a little bit strong at the canter, so lots of transitions. Don't stay in canter until they lose their balance and start to pull. To me, the scariest thing with this draft cross is that you have a little bit of a thoroughbred personality sometimes, and you have a 1,500, 1,600 pound horse, and they can go. And I've had a couple of these Clydesdales that have taken me for a merry ride around the arena. So I also have used sometimes a little bit stronger snaffle, or even a pelham at the beginning. If you are having difficulty with the horse pulling, they have to respect that they can't grab the reins and drag you around the arena. So again, with this horse, not too much stretching until they really understand that they have to stay a little bit there in front of your leg, but behind your hand under your seat. And let's go to the next slide. So again, just to reiterate, the draft type, try not to do the long and low, try not to let them run around on their forehand. Wait until they've had at least a year of training and they start to show a fairly good level balance. Then you can go ahead and start the stretch, and you usually will have a success then and do very well. My one student has won so many events. She actually is the cover girl on the USEA photo. You can see her Clyde Thoroughbred Cross, and he's one of the ones that drug me around the arena for a while. So, and now he understands he can't do that, and he's a very willing, wonderful guy. You just have to be a little careful at the beginning. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, this is the spooky horse, and I've had a lot of these. I've had some Swedish horses, I've had Arabians, I've had a couple of Trakehner's, some thoroughbreds, even some warm bloods that really would rather work. And I think a lot of times you have to ask yourself, is the horse really afraid of something, Or have they learned that this spooking is a total evasion and a way to end the work? Um, Riders have to be careful that they don't create more of a problem when the young horse does spook. This line of travel thing is so important. The horse in dressage needs to stay on the line of travel, even if they're a little nervous about something. I don't mind if they even come off the bit if they go where I want them to go, because then I can fix things. But when they put their head up and bolt sideways like this horse is doing, and now you're 5 feet off the rail, now you have a problem. So my best advice with the spooky horse is I love shoulder in. Let's go to the next slide. Take your time, be patient. Sometimes it takes months. There's a horse in my book that it took almost 2.5 years for Paula to be able to really ride a test. He was such a naughty boy, and he took advantage of her. And luckily, I have to say, Debbie McDonald and I had him in a symposium, and Paula had been riding with me in clinics, and I told her over and over, if he starts to spook, walk. He's got to go back to where you want him to go. He can do it at walk, but he has to go where you want. So don't be afraid to go to walk to make your point. Shoulder in is great. We had her hand walk him around the arena each direction so she could have a little bit of an idea where he was going to spook. Usually they're pretty predictable. If they pick a place at the beginning of your ride or the beginning of your warm-up, that's going to be their place for the rest of the day. So you can be smart, and before you get to that spot, walk, or before you get to that spot, go to a little bit of shoulder in. Avoid the kicking and spanking and the punishing. That just teaches them to fight, and that teaches them that they don't have to do the work, that they would much rather spook and be evil, and then all their work is done. So whatever you do, don't do that. Keep them on the line of travel, take away the impulsion, go back and get your submission, and then try to start in your warm-up where he's the most confident. I mean, sometimes I've had horses, we start on a 20-meter circle at X, and usually they spook more on their stiff side, so start on their supple side or their hollow side, and as you work on the circle, then start to gradually increase the circle a little bit on both ends, and eventually you'll be going all the way around the arena. Then you may have to start exactly the same way to the left. But remember, shoulder in, don't let them look at what they are spooking at. That's the worst thing you can do. Bring their head, their neck, and their shoulders to the inside of the arena. Very rarely do they spook at the dirt, so it's a much better way. It's much easier, and you'll be a lot less frustrated with the spooky horse. Okay, next slide. So we have a slide here that says where you can purchase the book, and hopefully we have some questions that we can answer for you. I hope you have some interesting things to ask me. So I'll turn this back over to Hillary, who has the list of questions and who will be asking me your questions. Hillary?
Yes, yes. And if there's any questions that any of the participants have, you guys will see in your box to the right. You can just type those in and we'll get to them as we have time. So the first question that we have is one of the participants mentioned that she sees her horse out in the field with a delightful extended trot, and without fail, as soon as she puts a saddle on, she has a problem getting that same energy. So she was wondering if you had any tips, for getting that energy from them.
Well, again, sometimes just taking the horse outside or riding outside where there is a little bit more going on is a good way to get them a little bit excited. Taking them, hauling them to different places, putting up some trot poles. You can even put cavaletti and raise them a little bit. I love doing cavaletti. We used to do that once a week at my barn. We also did some free jumping in the arena. If your horse doesn't like to use their back, free jumping them really helps them crack their back and makes them much, much more rideable. So I think You have to think about where your horse feels comfortable, where he thinks it's fun, and try to make things interesting for him. Try to have a little bit more atmosphere for him. But again, the lazy guy, you're going to have to do lots of transitions, and then when he doesn't go, you're going to have to tap him with the whip, and sometimes you have to make your point, and this is where it's a little bit scary sometimes for the riders that don't feel very secure in the saddle. You have to think of your aids as little more most. So a little tap, put your heel down, push your calf into the horse. That's the lightest possible aid. He should go forward. If he doesn't, within 3 to 5 seconds, you should give him a kick. 3 to 5 seconds, you should take your whip and you should give him a smack. And at the same time, make sure you've let go of the reins, because the worst thing you can do is kick and pull. The worst thing you can do is say, go, stop. So sometimes with a really, really lazy horse, you have to be willing to do a little bit of yahooing around the arena and say, good boy, that's what I want. They will learn to be more sensitive if you ask them the same way every time. If you ask them for one day and then the next day you get kind of lazy and don't continue, then they forget about it. So it's a matter of being consistent and a matter of having him respect your go forward aid and knowing that if he doesn't go, there's going to be a consequence. Okay, next question.
Okay, so we have someone who wrote in and she said that her horse responds quite a bit to heat and humidity. Could you give us some tips on planning both your training program throughout the year and your show schedule around horses that are affected by the weather like that?
Yeah, it's really hard. There are a lot of Frisians, especially a very difficult time with the heat and humidity. The best thing you can do is body clip them, and even in the summer, you may need to body clip them, ride them early in the morning or late at night. And I always had a big bucket full of ice water that I had just rubbing alcohol. I suppose you could use Vetrolin too. And I would just have my groom, if you don't have a groom, which you probably, most people are not so lucky, you may have to get off and just sponge your horse down a little bit in those sweat areas there in the neck, between the front legs, and a little bit between the hind legs. Don't put it over the loin area because you don't want to cool that down. You want to keep those muscles warm. But the alcohol, the ice water will cool them down, and then the alcohol also pulls a little bit of heat away from the body. So that's also a very good way at a horse show to help keep the horse a little bit more cool. But with a horse that does overheat, you just have to be very careful with where you ride them and how long you ride them, and make sure you check their breathing and let them walk and relax until their breathing comes back. Okay, next question.
Okay, and I had another question, and you had mentioned a little bit before about a show getting on in the morning and maybe doing a quick hack or a lunge. And the person who wrote in mentioned that they noticed, like at Devon, a lot of people will work their horses in the morning, but that they have often seen at the more local shows people just warming up for the typical 45 minutes. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm not sure a lot of the participants are familiar with the idea of riding a horse more than once a day.
Okay, and this is something, if you are going to use that plan, you need to try about 3 times a week to work your horse twice a day so they're used to it and they don't get too cranky. And I know if you have a full-time job, this is a little bit hard, but it's something you could, even if you had someone at your barn, trail ride them in the morning before you rode, in the evening after work, or even had your trainer lunge the horse once or twice a week before you rode them. Really, most of the top riders anywhere in the world, you'll see them come out in the morning and they'll be walking their horses, and they'll walk them for a good 30 minutes, and then they get on and they do just your basic stretching exercises. They don't do any of the movements. They do just getting the horse reacting to the aids, stretching the muscles, a lot of transitions back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Stefan does a lot of little walk, transition, stretch, bring him up, 2 steps piaffe, back to rising trot, a little bit of stretching. And They do this for 30 to 45 minutes, and then they put the horse back in the stall. And then before the show, they do a shorter warm up. They do a little bit of a stretch, not as much. They practice a few of the movements. I think you riders at the shows really have to realize that if they feel that they have to practice every single movement in the test that they're going to ride before they ride it, they're probably not ready to ride that test. You really should be showing one level below where you're training, and then it makes your life so much easier. You don't have to pray and hope that perhaps your flying change will happen when it hasn't happened at home for the last week. So, try and experiment with that, even with a lazy horse. A lot of times doing a little bit of a stretch in the morning and then doing a 20-minute short warm-up where all you do is walk on a long rein and then walk, trot, walk, canter, trot, canter, just back, forth, and then go into the ring. Try not to practice every movement. It wears your horse out and takes away a little bit of brilliance from your test. Okay, next question.
Okay, the next question we have is one of the participants has a horse that is low energy, but she is having the horse coming back into work after an injury. And I assume she's gotten the okay from the vet, but wanted some tips to quickly get forward for a low energy horse without overdoing it and hurting him again.
Yeah, that's a little bit tricky because you have to slowly build him up a little bit. I would say try to have um, short periods. Something else I strongly believe in is um, that your horse really shouldn't work at full power for more than 3 to 4 minutes before they should have a break. And most of the top riders in the world pretty much feel the same way. They do not ride the horse in the, let's say, Grand Prix frame for 45 minutes. They do 3 or 4 minutes, then they stretch, and then they walk, and then they change things, and then they pick the reins up and they do a little more work. And I think a lot of our riders here are focused on, I have 30 minutes or 45 minutes to ride, and they walk once in the middle, they don't change the frame, they don't make lots of transitions, they go on the left rein around and around and around, and then they go forward and they go on the right rein around and around. They have to change things quicker. So tell this gal also to maybe have a blood test done, make sure everything is good and healthy with the blood. Start to experiment a little bit with some different types of feed. A lot of low energy horses are easily corrected with a little different type of feed, and a lot of high energy crazy types also are being fed way too much protein and way too much alfalfa. And just by changing and adjusting the grain and the feed they're getting, it will make a huge change in how rideable they are.
Okay.
Next question.
So the next question is I have had a lot of people ask me about the warm up in general because while they feel actually comfortable with how their horse is once they're warmed up, they feel like if they could pay their trainer for 10 minutes of their time, it would be to help with the warm up. Could you talk a little bit why, for a lot of riders, the warm up is the hardest part to get through alone?
Well, I think, we get on our horse and we all should have a plan as to what we're going to accomplish today. Like, oh, I'm going to teach him this, or I need to work on this. And we have to be willing, though, to change that plan if the horse isn't supple, or if they're tense, or if they're lazy. The warm up is really the key. It's the warm up, let's say, is a little bit like testing the training scale. It's making sure the basics on your horse are very correct, that you have to go through the training scale. Is he regular in all of his gaits? Is he supple? And the suppleness is that we talked about, the highway, the stretch over the back, through the neck. Are those muscles carrying the energy forward to the contact, which is the third thing? And then the contact, is the horse stretching evenly into both reins? And if any of those answers are no, then you have to stop and work right there within the piece that's missing. You can't go to the next piece with which is impulsion. Um, Impulsion can be dangerous if you don't have enough submission. The only time you can add impulsion correctly and not make it speed or running is if those muscles are elastic and if they're working, and if the horse is accepting the contact. So, you know, I think part of what happens with a rider that's not a professional is they're not exactly sure. They may feel something. They may say, I feel something. I'm not sure what it is I feel. And at that point, they need their trainer there to have a discussion to say, gosh, this is what I feel. I feel he's falling through the outside shoulder. So I really feel like I need to counterflex to fix that. And the trainer would say, well, that's what you feel, but the real reason he's doing that is because he's pushing his rib cage against your inside leg. So again, feeling the rein is sort of the result of him pushing against your inside leg. And that's what you need to fix. So, I mean, I agree. I when I have a new student, their lesson mostly is on warm up. I say, please go warm up your horse like you normally do and let me watch. And probably within 3 minutes, I'm done watching and I'm talking to them and saying, okay, this is happening, and you need to fix these pieces in order to get your horse on the correct path. So again, that's why I wrote this chapter, because I think the warm up is so very, very important. And if the warm up is not correct, the warm up should be a little bit like your test, where you see, will the horse move off my inside leg? Test. Will the horse bend the head and the neck to my inside rein? Test. Will the horse move the haunches over off my outside leg? Check. Will the horse get rounder and slow down a little from the outside rein? Check. So, if you think of all of your different aids, think of your warm-up more like the checklist that the pilot would use before he takes off down the runway. So you have to think of your warm-up a little bit like that checklist, and you can't take off down the runway doing movements until you're sure all those pieces are in place. Next question.
Okay, so I have a question here about when you pick up your reins from doing your walk in the beginning of your ride, which should you start with, trot or canter, and why?
Okay, well, first of all, let's just talk about picking up your reins in the walk, because nobody does this right. You always, in a dressage test, come across the diagonal into a corner. So when you're schooling, make sure you start on a circle or go toward a corner. Pick up your inside rein first, supple the horse a little bit to the inside, push them a little sideways toward the outside rein, and then shorten the outside rein. If you shorten the outside rein first, you're going to bend the horse the wrong direction and push all the muscles into your inside leg. So you're already going to create a problem just by shortening the reins. Okay, so should you trot or should you canter? And that depends on the horse. Thoroughbreds love to canter. They don't like to trot. Trot is not their favorite thing. Oftentimes, cantering a thoroughbred first gets them much looser, much more supple. They let go of their backs much more quickly. Warm bloods, normally, they're better at trot than the canter. So normally for them, sometimes trotting is easier than the canter. So you have to a little bit, decide where is your horse more comfortable? Which gait is the horse more comfortable? And then, of course, which direction is he more comfortable? And, don't make it hard on yourself by starting in the stiffest direction in the gait that the horse dislikes the most. I mean, this is where you have to realize that the horse is stronger and you're smarter. So you have to think about a place always at the beginning where you can win, where you can get control of the horse's body. Okay?
Okay, so actually going back to the walk and before you pick up the reins, can you give some advice on how long you would recommend for someone to do a walk on the buckle before they start to do any work?
Until the horse breathes, until the horse relaxes. And this is very important. You have to realize you have to train the walk. And, a lot of people they don't even drop the reins to the buckle. They always have some contact with the horse, and they never let the horse learn to really use the neck and move the neck in the walk. And you have to walk until the horse relaxes, and you have to wait and be patient, and you have to do it 3 or 4 times during your ride if you want a high score in the test. So how long? Well, usually the horse, when they relax, they'll, do a little breathing, a little kind of feeling. So that's where it's important. Just it takes as much time as it takes, I guess, is the answer.
Okay, so the next question I have is that a horse in collected canter often feels to me like a sewing machine canter where he's taking little short steps. And so I'll go into the dressage test and I will feel like it's the best collected canter I've had, and I ended up getting a very low score. Can you explain how to feel the difference between the two?
Well, the you should feel it's not like a pogo stick. You should feel it's a little bit more like riding a trampoline. And so it sounds to me like the collected canter may be a little bit lacking elasticity or lacking suspension. So perhaps the neck might be too high, the back might be a little tight. You might actually let the neck go down. Try experiment a little bit, ride the collected canter a tiny bit more forward and see if you can get a little bit more of the feel for the elasticity and the spring off the ground. Next question.
Okay, the next question is you had talked about making sure to loosen the shoulder and back. Could you give some quick exercises that might be helpful for doing that?
Loosening the shoulders. Is that what you said?
Yes,
I'm
you
sorry.
said that you were wanting to loosen the shoulder and the back for the horse that needed to go forward. And I was hoping that you could give our,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, exactly. Sometimes I think it's a horse is very tight laterally. In other words, they don't have a lot of lateral reach and they don't have a lot of stretch. Think of spreading their front legs across, doing a leg yield where they're not just doing little teeny tiny steps, but you almost have to feel that you're pushing the horse out of balance. So they really have to reach through that outside shoulder and open up the angles there in the front legs. So you have to do um, some exercises that actually create more lateral reach there through the front legs, through the shoulders as well. We're always talking about the hind legs crossing. Another exercise that I really love, which of course you wouldn't do in the show ring, but it's a fabulous exercise at home, is to ride about a 3.5 track shoulder in and really bend the neck quite a lot. The neck will come a little bit lower with quite a lot of bend, and then concentrate on pushing that outside shoulder really uphill with your inside leg. Try to ride the shoulder in a little bit more forward where you're almost, again, pushing the horse a little bit out of balance, so they really have to pop that outside shoulder up and get a little bit more reach. That's really what makes a beautiful shoulder in, is that you have a lot of reach there through that outside shoulder. Next
Okay.
question.
The next question, it looks like, is from a trainer. She said that she has a lot of students who are transitioning from the hunter jumper discipline, and she was wondering if you could suggest some warm up exercises to get these riders to get more of a dressage seat and using their hands and knees in more of a dressage style.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit tricky because I did that as well. Luckily, I did some Western, so I was used to sitting a little straighter. But I think if the horse, once the horse is warmed up, they should do some sitting trot without their stirrups. Most of the hunter jumper riders have a very good lower leg, but it's a little bit too strong or too tight. They need to learn to allow that thigh and the lower leg to relax and move, and almost the ankle in the hunter jumper world is not a shock absorber because it's too rigid. So lunge lessons, if they can drop their stirrups and do a few, even just self-lunging exercises where they take the legs off and kick them down the little frog leg. They can point their toes down in the trot. Lots of riding without the stirrups, and just teach them to have a little bit soft or lower leg, and usually the upper body will come. It's to me a little bit, the upper body is more a function that the lower leg is a little bit too stiff and short. So if you can work without the stirrups, but not have them hold their leg in position like they were taught in the hunter jumper world, rather draw little circles with their toes and then pretend they're ballerinas, that they have to stretch their toes way down to the ground, things like that, and then doing little frog kicks. So anyway, that usually will help just get them a little bit softer and a little bit looser in the leg.
Okay, the
Next.
next question is one person wrote in and said that they have a high-necked hot young horse and was wondering whether or not you would recommending doing lunge work with a shambone to help teach him to stretch down. And I was also wondering if you could just explain to the other participants what a shambone is and just your feelings in general about it.
Okay. I absolutely, with the young horse, think lunging is a necessity. I mean, I never even got on the young horses I was breaking until they could walk, trot, canter with accepting the contact with their backs up and a fairly good balance on their own. Then I would get on and still be on the lunge line until they learned to carry the rider's weight. I think we get on them too soon and we expect them to understand what we want. So we need to be a little careful with that. As far as the different lunging equipment, side reins to me are only really should be used in upper level horses. If you have a young horse like this young one she's talking about, where the neck is already high, it can teach them to get a very nice set neck and not use the back. So I'm not a big side rein fan unless you have at least a second level horse or above. The Chambone works with pressure over the pole. There's also something called a neck stretcher, which is similar, and it comes from between the legs up over the pole and down. And it is workable. It does teach the horse to stretch the back. What I don't like about it, though, is there's no connection to the bit. So oftentimes the horse will lower the neck, but will be really wagging the head. So I prefer what we used to call them were Klosterhoffs or Vienna reins, the lunging reins that you can buy that are now legal at the showgrounds, that they're a little bit like a lunging draw rein. They go from the girth through the bit to between the horse's legs. And I like these because they encourage the horse to stretch out and down, but it gives some security in the contact so that the horse starts to learn to carry a little bit more weight evenly on both reins. And definitely, if you have a horse that is difficult to get them to stretch and relax the back, often doing a little bit of lunging gets them to release the back without you having to work so hard. And then when you get on them, it's much, much easier. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay. The next question is, what is a good way to deal with a horse that jigs in the walk, or in general, if you go from free walk to pick up the reins, they start to jig?
Okay, so first of all, really make sure your walk aids are clear. Your walk aids should be alternating seat bones, alternating legs. So when you're riding the walk, you'll feel the horse put you a little bit from one seat bone to the other. And you need to think about, you never can drive the horse with your seat forward in the walk because the walk has no impulsion. In other words, there's no suspension. Your lower legs, you need to feel the rib cage swing into one leg and then into the next leg. So when the rib cage swings into your leg, you would squeeze back and then take the leg off. So you just need to teach the horse that those are the walk aids, and then do a lot of work on a circle where you pick up the inside rein, start to push the horse a little bit sideways. If the horse is going sideways or in a little shoulder interlegial, there's less of a chance it's going to jig. And also be very careful at that moment that you keep using the walk aids. A lot of times the riders say, oh, my horse is going to jig, and so they stop and they don't do anything. They just sit like really quiet and hope that the horse will know what they want. You really have to teach the horse that that's the walk. Make sure you can slow the horse's walk down with your seat, thinking of placing each hind foot with your seat and making the horse slow down a bit. But you just need to do lots of transitions, free walk back, until the horse realizes that every time you pick up the reins, you aren't going to go to trot. So you just, again, need to be patient and take a little bit of time there. Next.
Okay, so this is a similar question. What tips do you have for helping horses to learn immobility in the halt at X?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to just teach them that whoa means whoa, even if they aren't square and their head is up, because whoa has to come first. So with the young horse, you just have to say whoa, and then make sure you take your aids off and you let go of the reins, because the horse has to stay there a little bit on his own. If you can't let go of the reins and he starts to walk forward again, then use the reins and again say whoa, and then let go. So that's the first piece. Once they understand whoa, then you can work a little bit on getting them to square up and getting them to stay a little bit rounder. They're very smart. They figure out quickly that if you touch them a little on the toward the shoulder with one leg, they would step up and square their front foot, and you can teach them a little bit. Also the same thing, if you move your leg back and touch them, that they come under. But I think for a square halt, you have to think of a couple of things. Number one, you have to come down center line and a little bit of shoulder fore. You can't come in a straight line with the horse straight like an L, because he'll fall on his shoulders and pull down on the reins. The only time the horse is like an L is in piaffe, passage, rein back, and the one-time changes, because those are the only movements where the horse is carrying the same amount of weight on both hind legs. So you have to remember that, and when we say in dressage the horse is straight, we really mean that they're in a little shoulder fore, that the haunches are on the line of travel and the shoulders are slightly displaced, just a little bit like a parenthesis. Then when you come down center line, you see you'll have an inside leg and an outside rein. And think about making the trot or the canter, if you're going canter halt. Make 3 half halts, little more most, where you make the trot smaller, 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 and then halt, so that you don't ask your horse to halt from a huge big trot. You want to narrow the base of support and give them a little bit better chance to get square and bring the hind legs under. Okay?
Okay, the next question is another trainer question where this trainer said that a lot of her students have mentioned that they finish work, they come from a computer desk chair to their car, and then they get out, and it's really hard for them to just get on and feel ready to ride. And I was wondering if you had any tips in or out of the saddle for speeding up that process so that the rider's warm up is shortened.
Well, I think definitely if it's cold weather, hopefully they have heated seats, so they need to drive from their office to the barn with their heated seats on so they can get their muscles a little bit warmed up. Stretching is very, very, very important. The riders have to remember they're athletes as well, and all people are crooked just like horses are crooked. So if you're right-handed, you're going to be right side short, left side long. Your left side's going to be stronger, your right side's going to be more coordinated. So you need to make sure that when you do some stretching that you think of things that stretch your right side and really reach up, touch your toes a little bit, do some big windmills and twists. Really try to think about which muscles you're going to use when you ride and try to stretch those out. And then when you're walking on a long rein, when you're letting the horse warm up, I would often then reach over and touch my toe with one hand, or pull my ankle up and stretch my thigh down, or do some simple exercises yourself when you're on the horse while the horse is walking and warming up too. Again, it, you just have to take your time, and I know everybody needs more time in their lives, that's for sure. But try to take time enough for the horse to walk and relax, and use that time for you also to get a little bit supple and stretched.
Okay, so for the last thing, as none of the participants know, I actually first met Janet because she was my one of my faculty members for my USDFL education program, and we could not finish this webinar without her getting a chance to talk about the new 2013 rider tests for the last 5 minutes or so. So I was hoping you could just let everyone know what they are, what they're most useful for, and how exciting that they will be this year.
Well, these rider tests came out of the standards committee where we were discussing having people qualify to move up the levels, which wasn't very popular. But the popular part was the idea that we would have these equitation tests. And they're not just for adult amateurs, they're not just for juniors, they're for open riders as well. And we have a training first and second level one. And if you haven't looked at them, go to the USEF website and download them. They are actually a little bit more difficult than the test 3 of the level. But the interesting thing about them is they are judged like the young horse test. We don't give scores for every movement, and there is no gait score. There's nothing in these tests that talk about the quality of the horse at all. The whole concept of the test is to show that the rider, number one, has a correct position. That's one of the scores. In other words, how do you look? How's your vertical alignment, shoulder, hip, heel, elbow, hand to the bit, all of those things. The second score is how correct is the influence over the horse and over the movements. And so we have turn on the forehand, which has never been in our test before in the first level one. And movements are strung a little bit more closely together. And there's a lot of emphasis. The third score is on accuracy. How well does the rider use the corners? How well does the rider lay out the serpentines? Those sorts of things. And then we have the reaction of the horse. Does the horse react to the rider's aids, or when you ask for the canter, does the horse kick at your outside leg? So there is one score for the horse, but it's really more about how he reacts to the aids. And then the last score is for harmony. The first year we aren't going to have awards for USDF, but we are looking because we need to train our judges, and I hope that the riders will go ahead and ride these tests and then understand that we're working hard this year in our judges forums to get the judges trained and hopefully get a standard. So we didn't want to give awards before we had a standard set. But the scores on these rider tests, the ones I've done, horseshow.com is letting people do ones for free, sending something in, and I've done about 10 of them. And it's interesting because the scores are actually higher, a little bit like the young horse, 68% or 72%, that had we been judging every little detail score by score, it probably would have been a little bit lower. So it gives the judge a chance to talk about the equitation, and it gives the riders that don't maybe have the most expensive horse with huge gaits a chance to really shine and excel at another venue. So hopefully we'll see you all out there riding those this year, and if you enjoy them and like them, we'll be glad to ride a third and fourth level one. Right now we're just at those training first and second, but I hope you all enjoy them because I think they've been fun to create, and I really think it's a great idea. I think everybody can have a little bit better equitation.
Well, thank you very much, Janet. And I did want to end with saying we had some questions about the trot stretch circle, which is as hard to say as it is to ride.
It is.
And I just wanted to let everyone know that Janet does a wonderful job of covering that in depth in the January issue. So we hope that everyone who had questions about that will look for her answers and tips on riding that movement. Janet, thank you very much. We encourage everybody to check out her book. It is a wonderful resource at Horsebooks, etc. And we will continue to be doing webinars like this throughout the next year with other Book of the Month clubs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the book, and I look forward to seeing you at sea. Thank you so much for coming.